my passion probably comes from, yeah, sort of educating the wider population, combating misinformation, sort of talking about healthy habits and how we can, lead the best quality of life possible. And I think GP fits that the best. I think if I went into something really super specialised, I'd probably ask myself why, because it would probably contradict the message that I try and put across and that I'm most passionate about.
Amos Madra.
Dr. Ethan Smallwood, one of the youngest doctors in the country at just the age of 23 years old. A warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I think it's been a really good conversation, and yeah, I look forward to it.
So I can see, obviously, just finished work and busy as always. Thank you for making the time to do this interview today. Tell us, first of all, did you always want to be a doctor? Was medicine always something that you wanted a career you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting story, really. So I remember during sort of primary school, which is 7 to 11, in the UK, and I always remember being quite bad at science, which is, I was always quite good at maths and English, and I remember my science grades just weren't that good. And then somewhere, I think just when I started senior school, I don't quite know what happened, but something just seemed to click where I seemed to just understand the science more and kind of the biology and chemistry, which is it's important to get into medicine. And then I suppose around the same time, I had a couple of sort of illnesses in the family where, you see how family members are treated and just how much of a difference, not only the doctors, but the whole kind of multidisciplinary team and how much, they add to someone's life. And so it kind of grew from there, really. So I think, from the start of secondary school, and then I think as you go through the years, I enjoyed science at school. And then, from about 13, 14, you can start to do things like work experience. So I did that a few times. And so I think it just grows from there, and it kind of snowballs. As you get older, you get more opportunity to kind of see what the life of doctors like. And from there, I it was something I really wanted to do, probably from, the age of 12, 13 onwards.
And at that time, 12, 13, it's quite early to know the career that you wanted to go into. Did you have the awareness and understanding that obviously with the grades you'd need to get between 9 to 7 on your GCSEs, English, maths and sciences?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to get into medicine, you feel like you almost have to start quite early anyway, just because there's a lot of things you have to do, not only in terms of getting the grades, but you need to be able to show proof of why you want to study medicine. So, things like work experience, volunteering, having outside interests, they were really important. In terms of the grades, I was probably always quite studious at school anyway. So that seemed to kind of be fine. But yeah, in terms of the rest of my family, they were all really into like accounts and tax and these really boring things. So I think I definitely had the self-awareness that I didn't want to do anything just sat at a desk. And so medicine, felt a lot more attractive and something that you just can get, you can really do something different every day, and you can talk to people every day rather than just sat at a desk, which I didn't want to do.
And that's really interesting. And of course, taking a different pathway from your family members, of course, you must have felt like an outsider at some point.
I guess, yeah. I think particularly back then as well, there probably wasn't the resources that we have now in medicine and sort of looking at, how kind of doctors operate or medical students. So I felt in some ways that I guess I was leading a path into the unknown, because I didn't necessarily have, family members that I could rely on to be like, okay, here's what the job's like. And, obviously social media was around 10 years ago, but it certainly wasn't the TikToks and, Instagram reels. And, I remember I didn't even get Facebook actually until I was probably quite 17, 18 years old. So I was quite late. So at the time I didn't really have social media. There wasn't really that much information out there. So I guess I just kind of I like medicine. I like the idea of it. And then just kind of went there, but I didn't necessarily have all the resources that we do today.
And you talked about volunteering, work experience. At what age did you start doing that?
Oh, I think that probably came in during probably when I started doing my Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. So that's quite a common award scheme we have in the UK where we can do, physical expeditions, skills, and so on. So I remember helping out at a charity shop on a weekend morning every week for about 3 hours. I then did some work as I got older. I was about 15 or 16 with kids with sort of various disabilities, which I found really good and rewarding. And I also did some work at an old people's home that I really enjoyed as well. It was always, I suppose, it's the battle as well of being able to try and balance all that alongside the academic stuff, because you're aware that without getting the grades that nothing else is possible, even though, you enjoy doing the voluntary work outside of that.
Yeah, and I suppose that also taught you some really good transferable skills, listening skills, empathy, and of course, it's all about connecting with people, because it's that relationship that your patients remember more than anything else.
Yeah, I think they're probably skills as well that we probably don't learn too much at school. I think with those sort of softer skills, you probably just need as much practice as you can. There probably is a level where some people are naturally better than it, than others, but I think it just involves a lot of practice. And at school, obviously, you don't have classes on communication or empathy or, I guess, how to connect with others. So I think, yeah, having those other experiences outside of the Monday to Friday at school certainly helped.
Talk to us about the transition from A levels to university, and then also transitioning from university into the world of work.
Yes, I mean, A levels were quite difficult. I remember, I actually became quite ill during the middle of my A levels. So yeah, it was during probably about the third or fourth exam in my kind of my second year of A levels in the AT levels, where I felt quite ill quite suddenly. I remember having to do my exams, sat like lay in a bed, like in a sort of not in an actual hospital, but in kind of like this like matron's bed that was on the school site. So that made exams harder in terms of A levels. But at the time, I still had the determination. I was like, nothing's going to stop me here. Like, I'm definitely going to pass these exams and get the grades, because I wasn't going to let all the years previous to that sort of fall away. And then med school was really good. I think that was quite a hard 5 years. I think you come into med school almost thinking that the hard work's done because of how competitive it is to get into. Because you have to get minimum A's at A levels, lots of A's and GCSE and so on. And so you get to med school and there's that real relief, and then you quickly realise that again these exams are much harder than A levels, and that you've got to still pass these, and you've got 5 years. But again, it was still a really enjoyable experience. You still had the social life. And then I think, the huge relief came at the end of medical school, because once you pass your finals, you have around a couple of months of internship and shadowing the sort of the current doctors that you'll be replacing. And since then, it's just been really nice going into the first year as being a doctor. I've just really enjoyed not having the thought of impending exams coming up, and just been able to actually enjoy the career a lot more, because when you come off the back of about 7 or 8, 9 years of regular exams that are really tough, it does just cause you to be a bit stressed. And so, I'm not saying being a doctor's easy, but in some ways it feels a bit easier than sometimes being at medical school or at college.
You certainly need a lot of patience, don't you?
Yes.
So, looking ahead in the future, are you thinking of focusing on a particular area? Do you want to look at tropical medicine or perhaps cancer, or is there an area that you want to specialize or become a consultant in?
Sure. I mean, I think the beauty of it right now is that in our foundation training, we experience a lot of different specialties in the community and in hospital. So I wouldn't want to commit to any particular specialty right now, but I think to be honest, I imagine myself getting into GP training. I think I prefer to be more of a generalist than a specialist. I think my passion probably comes from, sort of educating the wider population, combating misinformation, sort of talking about healthy habits and how we can, lead the best quality of life possible. And I think GP fits that the best. I think if I went into something really super specialized, I'd probably ask myself why, because it would probably contradict the message that I try and put across and that I'm most passionate about.
Yeah, I'm glad you've actually mentioned that, because you are very popular on social media. You are a celebrity doctor on platforms like TikTok. I believe over 1 million, 3 million plus views, and so many people interested in your content. Talk to us about getting into social media. Why did you do it? What was the reaction when you realized there was such a demand for what you're doing? And of course, your subject of dealing with misinformation.
Sure, yeah. So, I kind of alluded to it a bit before, but I really got into social media quite late. I think my parents have always kind of said to me, focus on your exams, focus on school. Social media is kind of fun, but it can be a distraction, which I kind of agree with still. And so I didn't actually get Facebook and Instagram until, well, just after my exams, or it was just around the time of my A-levels, or kind of just afterwards. So, bear in mind, I was about 18 when I got Instagram and Facebook, which is probably, for people nowadays, that would be really crazy and unsociable. And so I got Instagram and Facebook. I think Instagram was probably more important for me. It was a way really of just documenting that time at medical school, because, even 5 or 6 years ago, there was no real people that I could think of that were doing or talking about medicine, be that, doctors, nurses, medical students, I don't know, physiotherapists. And so it felt like to me that there was a real gap in terms of information out there that I wish I'd have had. Because like I said, I didn't have any family members in the profession. I had bits of work experience, but I felt like, as I said, I was going into this unknown somewhat. And I was like, well, if I feel like this, there's got to be a lot of people that are going to be feeling similar to me. And so that's why I kind of started the Instagram. It was, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and it gave me a chance to kind of talk about university life. And so that was in 2016. I suppose, things grew steadily from there. I think things, picked up quite a bit during the COVID pandemic as well. Obviously, naturally, health and medicine became, really into the fore of people's minds. And I think that's when, it became really obvious that misinformation can be a really big problem. And it's probably something that, again, that, in my lifetime previous to that, I don't think we necessarily had that to such an extent, probably in other areas of life, but in terms of medicine and healthcare, we probably haven't had such controversy. And so, as more eyes got onto medicine and healthcare, I suppose, naturally, content can go viral and I can spread a message to more people. And I guess, TikTok came along, I think probably just before COVID as well, or I got into it in the 6 months or so before COVID. And so it was probably that beginning of TikTok and, during the pandemic that things took off even more.
Yeah, absolutely interesting. It just goes to show, the importance of spreading that message, because of course, who would have heard of fake news? It wasn't something that you thought about. You didn't think that such a thing could happen. And of course, the misinformation that was just spreading everywhere. So it was really important for doctors like yourself to come across and to present the truth, which is really important. And again, for young people to hear it from somebody who looks like them, who's young like them, makes a massive difference, rather than, say, somebody who's much older they cannot relate to. So I suppose it makes you very appealing to a very young audience.
I think so, yeah. As I said, I think certainly when I was growing up, there was no real doctors that I could think of that would inspire me. I suppose in a sense you'd kind of expect that, right? Like, it's not the same as, I don't know, looking up to your favorite footballer or actor or basketball player or whatever. And so it's kind of hard to find inspiration sometimes in medicine, because obviously when we go to see the doctor, it's normally around bad events or, illness. So these are things that we don't want to draw inspiration from. But I guess where I try and sort of, change that picture somewhat is medicine can be fun. I think we can, try and make things as fun as possible by taking, you know, accountability for our health, improving, you know, quality of life. And it's also that realization as well that, you know, sometimes health and, you know, during the pandemic, this is going to affect all of us. Obviously, you know, health and disease will affect all of us anyway. And if I can do that at a younger age and kind of show, you know, I'm not just some person that spends, you know, 20 hours a day in books or, you know, never leaves the house, that I'm, you know, I can try and be relatable and just be another young person. And, you know, hopefully that helps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you manage to fit in that work-life balance? Because I think your working hours are close to 50 a week, aren't they?
Yeah, it's difficult in the sense, I think I've always been used to working a lot of hours, because going back to A levels, GCSEs, medical school, because, you know, if you look at a typical school week, let's say it's I think it's about 9 till 4 for us. Obviously, you know, a little bit less than a sort of typical working day. But then you had all the exams and revisions. So I remember having to come back and, you know, you might get back from school at 4:30, but then you spend the next 3 or 4 hours either doing homework, essays, revising tons for exams. And so you kind of, once you've had that mentality and that mindset and you've had to do that for so long, it doesn't really feel any different than when you then progress into medical school. And medical school was hard. I remember doing a lot of, well, weeks of doing, you know, 8 to 10 hours of revision a day. Like it is hard. And so I think, yeah, when you come into work, again, that time that you then spent in the evenings or on weekends doing revision, I can then replace that with, say, doing research or writing a script or coming up with content. So I think you're almost just replacing the time spent doing exams with, sort of doing content.
Fantastic. And that's how you maintain it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think, you know, there's always gonna be an element where, yeah, you probably have to compromise somewhat, and, you know, maybe when you've got time off, you can maybe film a few videos, so you've got, you know, a little bit of a backlog. But yeah, it's always a bit of a battle finding time. I think that's the beauty of it, really. I think sometimes if you have lots of time, then you can become less productive and just not get a lot done as well.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And of course, I'm sure there's going to be more opportunities coming in the future, and we'll be seeing you on TV screens everywhere. Did you have any doctors when you were growing up, and just any films that you watched and you thought, you know, that doctor looks pretty cool, and that looks like, you know, someone like Dr. Doogie Howser? I don't know if you remember that.
I don't, I'm afraid. No, I honestly can't think of anybody that I really looked up to. I guess, you know, there's probably shows that maybe I've walked in, you know, when my parents have been watching TV in the living room, and there's been like an A&E documentary of, you know, how intense that can be, or, you know, those sort of fly on the wall TV shows. There wasn't anything I ever really watched regularly. I guess during medical school, I became aware of shows like Grey's Anatomy and watched the odd TV sort of episode. But I was always of the opinion as well that because I was spending so much time either in, you know, education or medical school, I didn't want any more time to go into sort of them watching that on TV. I think I wanted that separation where it's like, if I'm at home now, I want to do other things or, you know, have other interests. And so I didn't want to completely engross myself in all things medicine at all times of the day. Otherwise, I think that can probably be a bit of a stress, you know, watching TV about serious operations. You know, I think, you know, you need that release a little bit in other ways and other hobbies.
You're very self-aware and, you know, very focused. Talk to me about your philosophies. That's the sort of person you've always been, that self-awareness.
I think it's hard to say. I think during childhood, I think looking back, it all just went so quickly. I think, yeah, again, during all the exams and revision, I think everything just feels like a blur now in terms of, I don't necessarily think I had a philosophy other than just to get to the end and just pass the exams. I think maybe in the last couple of years, I think I've tried to develop and read a lot more books and kind of understand what makes people successful, or just on lots of things, really, like self-help books and so on. But I think the self-awareness, or, you know, trying to be self-aware, probably has only come in the last 12 to 18 months.
And I suppose that's come at the right time, isn't it? Because, you know, 23, ripe old age.
Yeah, well, that's the question, isn't it? as you naturally mature anyway, it's hard to know sometimes whether it was just a natural step in your life that, you get more mature, you get more knowledge, or whether it is as a direct result of, getting through this part of medical school. And so it's hard to necessarily pin down what's changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can we expect from Dr. Ethan Smallwood in the future then?
I wish I knew. I think lots more content. I think talking about things that I'm passionate about, probably moving, as I get more sort of knowledge and spend more time in the profession, just talking more about a holistic idea of health. So, that's physical health, mental health. And then I'd also talk more about that kind of emotional and kind of purpose to your life type health. I think, mental health, we can fluctuate during the days and weeks. But I think it's also important to look more at that overarching purpose in life as well. And I kind of almost look at that as a separate thing. And, you've got three aspects: physical, mental, and emotional. So I'd like to tap in more into those and kind of paint more of a global view of health. Obviously, when we go to see the doctor or when we go into hospital, we don't necessarily have as much time as we'd like with the doctors or with the healthcare professionals. So it's, how can I kind of give as much time to people as possible? And, in the most likely case, it's probably through Instagram or TikTok, because, GPs only have 10-minute appointments, or if you're in hospital, there's a quick turnover of patients. So I suppose that's what appeals to me anyway, is the fact that the time I have on social media or to produce content, it's as much as I want it to be within reason. Whereas, there's more constraints in the kind of typical working week.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. It's a bit of a general question. You talked about physical, mental, and emotional. What can we all do to help ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally?
Okay, I think physically, I think it's all on a spectrum, right? I suppose you could look at it based on whether somebody, looking to really achieve top results as an athlete versus the kind of general population. I think for most people, it's just simple measures, managing stress, managing sleep, eating a little bit healthier, whether that's just having a bit of, fruit and veg with each meal, sufficient protein intake, exercise a certain amount of times per week. And I suppose related to that is probably creating a routine, because these are all kind of generic things of managing sleep, managing stress, diet, exercise bits, and how do we actually put that into a routine around work, around kids, around family. So I think that's important. Mental health, again, obviously really important. We've seen just how difficult it is during the pandemic, particularly when we've become isolated from others and maybe we don't spend as much time with others, due to things like social distancing and stuff. So I think, making sure you have connections with people, getting support when you need it. And then with that kind of emotional and, sort of spiritual or purpose to your life, I would always seek advice from others. It's something I've toyed with myself, whether I'd even like to have like a life coach or someone to talk to that's just got an unbiased perspective. But you don't necessarily have to do it with a professional. You can speak to a family member, a friend, because that purpose in your life, I think it's so important, because like I said, you can have fluctuations in your physical and mental health day to day, week to week, but if you feel like you're on the right course of your life overall, I think that can add a lot and really help with both your physical and mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And that's the holistic approach. Thank you very much, Dr. Ethan. And finally, how can the audience connect with you?
Yeah, so I think a few different ways. So I've got a website that you can look at. So that's drethan.co.uk. So that's doctor spelled DOCTOR rather than DR. And then Instagram, TikToks again, Dr. Ethan, which is DOCTOR Ethan. I try and produce content pretty regularly on Instagram, TikTok as well. YouTube, again, you can just type in Dr. Ethan. So that's more longer form content where it gives you opportunities to talk about topics or sort of even just, sort of things in the news that are related to medicine in a longer form content, whereas obviously TikTok and Instagram is very much about quick, snappy captions, photos, reels, and so on. So yeah, they're the main ways I'd say people can get in contact.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethan Smallwood. What a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we hope to have you back here again soon to give us some more wisdom again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
If you want some amazing inspiration, check out the videos next to me, and I'll see you right there.